Look, who's to say what the first worker placement game was? Many have laid claim to the accolade. But as time has passed, so have the varying degrees of complexity attached to this most evergreen of mechanics. I'm your narrator Benji, and this is 10 levels of worker placement games. Now think of this list as a curriculum of sorts for you to start at the beginning with the easiest of games where you place a worker, be it meeple, dice or token, and do not much else, and end with the tightest, most ruthless, conniving and cutthroat place your worker affair. So to the ground rules, of which there is only one main one. The game should have worker placement as the or a focal point of the game's mechanics. That is, you place a component of which you should have a limited number available on a space, and then something happens. Invariably the gathering of a resource or the ability to take a type of action. So get your counting shoes on, strap yourself in and get ready to go from remedial to master's degree in 10 educational steps. Number 1. Mintworks. I find it absolutely agreeable that the lightest game on this list is also packaged in a welcome micro-sized container. And what's more, it does what it says on the tin. Your workers are represented by mints. It's just magical thematical design, and it's simple to boot. Take your mint tokens and use them to either earn more tokens or buy and build plans, which are how you ultimately earn points. It's easy does it like this until a player first reaches 7 of those points. Oh yes, a prime number, which is further evidence of this fresh-faced travel game's elegant simplicity. What better way to start your learning experience than with a mosquito weight game that brings a splash of card drafting to proceedings. Number 2. IMHOTEP. Sees us segue in from tiny sweets to ancient history. The setting, a long since past Egypt, that sees you become builders looking to emulate the big daddy of architects, IMHOTEP. To do so, you'll be looking to create monuments, and you'll be achieving this by procuring new stones, loading stones on a boat, bringing a boat to a monument, or playing action cards. Which means there's a little bit more to this than the previous entry, but it still fits snugly in the mouse weight category, adding area control and set collection to proceedings this time. Not only that, the game introduces you to the concept of hindering others at the same time as pursuing your own game plan. Number 3. Lords of Waterdeep is our first entry that could fit into the category of gateway game, and maybe it's fitting that it's thematically based on the classic Dungeons & Dragons universe, a recognisable brand if ever there was one. The worker placement here is as traditional as it gets. You start with a couple of workers and you get more as the game goes on, and each time you place a worker you get a resource, or draw or play cards. And it's those cards that give you the quests you'll need to score points, with, you guessed it, the cashing in of said resources. Not only that, each space is first come first serve, so act swiftly and efficiently if you want to take home the spoils in this Chihuahua weight staple. Number 4. Raiders of the North Sea is by no means a huge step up in terms of complexity, but it did introduce one of the most elegant iterations of conventional worker placement of the last 20 years. In that each turn you would not only place a worker and do the thing the space dictates, but you would also take a worker that had previously been placed from the communal board and do what that space allowed. How can something so simple be so refreshing? Now the rest is fairly straightforward fare that sees you raiding and pillaging local settlements, incrementally gathering more valuable resources as you make your way up the board in this wonderful fox weight game. Number 5. ELDERVALE. The first half of our midway point committed to cutesy artwork that depicts a myriad of woodland creatures, but it's complex enough to start introducing other mechanics in equal measure alongside our topic of discussion today. The core of the game, outside of the tableau and city building, is to eke out as much resources from the meagre workers that you're given access to throughout the game's 4 seasons. And what you're learning here then is not next level worker placement, but added complexity due to how it interacts with the hand management, drafting and city building elements that make up an odd mechanical couple in this giant tortoise weight but accessible game. Number 6, Viticulture, is the first of what I call tight worker placement games. I say tight because there are small margins between success and failure, and there's very little in the way of bloat here. Playing inheritors of a vineyard in Tuscany, your goal is to plant vines, improve its infrastructure, turn grapes into wine, and then flog the wine to eager consumers. What pitches this at the next level is the differing actions available to you during each season, making forward planning even more integral to your performance, especially as you're all vying for limited spaces. If your only interest is pure worker placement with no bells and whistles, then this dairy cow weight game is pitched just about smack bang in the middle complexity wise. Number 7, Dwellings of ELDERVALE, is the newest entry on this list and also the first pure mechanical hybrid. That, however, can take nothing away from the fact that every time you place a worker, each with different specialities, be it the warrior, wizard, dragon or regular pleb, and then carry out an associated action. You'll play one of the many unique factions found in the box, with the setting being a once lost magical world. Whilst it might also incorporate area control, tableau building, modular boards and conflict resolution, the core of the game remains. And as this is an entry of firsts, it's also the first game you would consider advanced or elephant weight. So you're definitely stepping it up at this point, with difficult decisions to make about where to place your dudes. Number 8, Underwater Cities, is another hybrid game that goes one step further and even mixes the act of worker placement with action cards, making for a quite frankly awesome cocktail of always taking the action on the space you placed your worker, but only taking the action on the card if its colour corresponds with the colour on the space. It's that ingenious design that underpins the city building, hand management and tableau building in a dinosaur weight game that sees you dealing with overpopulation by delving down to the deep blue sea in order to make new homes for the human race. Now, whilst this isn't a pure worker placement game by any means, and perhaps a game like Shulkin would have been a better fit, but I'm sorry, this one's too good not to put on the curriculum. Number 9, Caverna, aka the natural successor to Agricola. One of, if not the reason, worker placement games are so prevalent to this day. It sees you play as a wee little dwarf family that lives in a little cave in the mountains. It's one of those tight worker placement games that I've already mentioned, because you start with just 2 family members, and you'll be expanding both outside and inside the cave you call home, cultivating the land outside and digging your way to resources on the inside, where every little decision counts. This is arguably the zenith of pure worker placement games, and streamlined somewhat from its predecessor, but also making for a more modern space shuttle weight Euro worker placement game. And number 10, Anachrony. Now, could it be argued that any game that incorporates time travel is sure to up the complexity level? Well, it's no banker, but you're not shy of having to think in 4th dimensional terms when deciding whether to travel to the capital city with your workers or to venture forth to areas affected by a catastrophic explosion, all the while conversing in fragments with the past and the future, all in order to save an even greater cataclysm from occurring. There is, it must be said, a lot going on in this, with 4 core types of workers, and they need to balance between the consumption of resources that need to last you the game and prospering in the here and the now. You are of course aided in this by loaning from your future selves, and trust me, it's an elegant system despite the difficulty in merging the thematic and the mechanical. Either way, this planet-sized game is well earned in its spot at the top level of this list. Before we wrap up, however, this doesn't have to be the end of your journey. There were other, more complex games that made the initial long list, but ultimately past a certain point of complexity, worker placement becomes only one part of a smaller whole. In effect, just one piece of a conglomeration of small mini-games that make up one larger game. But in the spirit of transparency and pushing the boundary, you could go real Mensa bending with these galaxy weight titles. Each of them employ, at least in some small part, little tokens and components that you place on a space. But there you have a list on natural progression of the worker placement genre. These would almost assuredly be the games I would teach in order if I were a lecturer at the University of Board Games. Let me know if you feel like I missed anything glaring or there was a key educational tool missing from this here list. For now though, my name is Benji and this is him telling you that this video has ended.